title is The Systems Approach to Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae Elimination. As a bit of background, Schwartz Farms is a family-owned pig production company. We're based in southern Minnesota, town of Sleepy Eye, a couple hours southwest of here. We have 15 breeding herds comprising or making up 62,000 sow base approximately in southern Minnesota, northeast Nebraska, and one in southeast South Dakota, and then the nursery or wean finish production, grow finish in those areas in addition to northwest Iowa. So the first question I ask, and somewhat rhetorically for me, but is why pursue Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae negative status in the system? Why not just vaccinate the pigs and go on with life, and why work down this path? And so there's been a number of studies, several studies or evaluations of the financial impact of the mycoplasma negative pig. One by Caden and Painter and others showed 63 cents to $10.41 financial impact of the mycopositive pig, and that variation was dependent on other co-infections. I showed 3 years ago here in our system a field-based evaluation or study of myconegative compared to mycopositive flows. I showed $2.58 to $2.83 range, very conservative. And over that time period of 2012 through the second quarter of 15, the mycopositive flow was PERS negative through that whole time, whereas the myconegatives were PERS positive over part of that time period. So it was skewing it to the conservative side, but individual closeouts in those groups in the mycopositive, huge variability in anywhere from $6 to $7 per pig financial impact. And so we wish to pursue, as do all producers, I'm sure, continuous improvement in our system, and to be able to produce a robust myconegative pig is one step in that direction. Control over other pathogens, flu, for example, PERS to some degree, also more so than the mycoplasma. We have the ability to eliminate mycoplasma pneumonia from our pig flow, and so we pursue that goal. Continued pressure on antibiotic usage, and in addition to that, there's a cost of that usage, and with marginal effectiveness at times, even one needing to use additional antibiotics on a mycoplasma positive pig flow. We began filtering sow farms in 2009 and continued through last year. And so in my opinion, the probability of remaining mycoplasma negative with the reduction in the incidence of lateral transmission of mycoplasma gave me more confidence to pursue a myconegative status on the breeding herds. And the question still remains, and it's been asked, and is when we work to do a mycoplasma elimination, are we truly eliminating that pathogen completely from that population, or are we reducing it to a level so low that it's undetected clinically for some time period? And the case right now I'm working with them, that question is very much in my mind. So what is the systems approach as I worked on this? And really four aspects I would say is, number one is the establishment of the goal that we will in our system eliminate mycoplasma pneumonia from our system, from all 15 breeding herds across our system. Secondly, once that's been established, is then what is our status? Sometimes very clear cut. Other times it takes some degree of work and effort and surveillance to make sure we have that each of those farms classified correctly. Thirdly, to establish a prioritization in our systems. Which farms will we work on first, in what order? And there's other cofactors and factors involved in that, with PERS status or construction and gilt flow changes, etc. And lastly is establish that program, that protocol in detail for each of the farms specifically, with the timetable, and Dr. Yeski and others of his associates, Dr. Lorky and others, work with us as a team, and we work through those details to make sure we can have the highest likelihood of success in the program. So first of all, the establishment of the goal to eliminate mycoplasma from the system. It involves work, and there's stakeholders involved, right? There's the owners, number one, of the production system, that they understand that there's a cost involved, there's additional labor and management involved, there may be some impact on pig flow if closure has to be extended for some time beyond the original plan, etc. The consulting veterinarians, the production or production director, or the director of that mycoplasma elimination program, who's the point person, and are they totally in tune to what the program is and how to carry it out. And the farm manager, the farm supervisor, and the production staff, again, they're the individuals incurring the extra labor, the extra processes, and they're not the ones seeing the benefit of that production, of that extra work in establishing that mycoplasma negative status. It's for the grow-finished pig, and so they're the ones taking on the work and understanding the importance of the attention to detail. Secondly, determine the status. Most often, that's not real difficult, but at times there's some subtleties to it. Of the pig flows in our system, basically, which ones are we talking about a late-term cough and fallout and mortality? Which ones we just don't talk about in regard to respiratory problems, mid to late finishing. Other times there's serology and collection to determine for sure what the status of that flow is. And secondarily on that is very important to confirm the status of the replacement gilt supply. It's not that many years ago, in working through our gilt supply agreements, that there was some pushback to me saying that if the mycoplasma hyopneumoniae status would turn positive on a multiplier from which we're buying gilts, that we wouldn't take that. That would be a condition on which we would not take those gilts. And it wasn't that many years ago that was looked at as being not real common. So knowing that status, and then knowing that the testing and the surveillance protocols are adequate in that flow, if there's a change, we can pick that up as soon as we can. The next aspect then is to prioritize in a system where we have multiple positive sow farms. In what order are we going to do these? And again, there are other factors and constraints involved in that decision. For example, there may be a necessity for a closure for PERS, and then the decision would be made, let's do the mycoplasma right away with it. Important to note that PERS closure time may be established at 200 or 210, and the mycoplasma 280 or perhaps 300, if ideally. And so, looking at the time periods, any scheduled, for example, in our case, there were perhaps scheduled filtration construction on the sow farm, and then do a closure at the same time for PERS and then mycoplasma. The availability of off-site alternative gilt development facilities during that closure. There's only so many of those available in a biosecure location. The prevalence of the existing gilt development unit is at a low level of mycoplasma. Is it shedding late into that population? Are we getting into early? And in the recent 2 years, different methods, as Dr. Peters
talked about this morning to make that process more predictable and take less time. A labor constraint.
There may be a possibility of having to do an off-site breeding project in conjunction. Where is that site at, and how far away is it from the labor pool, and do we have the labor to do that? And so those are part of the elements in the equation as we work through these processes back in the last years. So historically, in our system, it's been the closure method for mycoplasma eradication or elimination. There are alternatives to that, and we did use that in the mass antibiotic here in the last year. And I wanted to note, too, in our system, at some point we need to look at, in this systems approach, we've never considered depop and repop. And at times we need to look at that and say, is that the best financial option to get that negative pig faster and a higher degree of certainty of success? Market conditions may be a factor in determining that, which method you would use, and if that's part of our equation. The last aspect in those 4 items is then that protocol, that detailed protocol of the start date, what we call the day 0, the contingency dates, the action items within each farm, the post-closure testing protocols, etc. And so all these, each of these items is written down, and I put this in several pages here, but with the farm name, the date, etc., when our elimination program is beginning, when the closure date is, the exposure completion date on the off-site GDU or on-site, the vaccination dates, the antibiotic administration dates, when the piglets are receiving the blanket antibiotics, the whole herd vaccine, and so write down the list of every action item and every date, and then checking off with who did it and was it complete, and is there any follow-up on that. And so really that's the to go through that, and it takes a team approach to make sure we're not missing anything, and to go through all that work and to miss some detail in there, just to make sure that everything is completely evaluated and checked off on. So what does that look like, and how that looked going in our system in the past number of years? We did a couple of the off-site breed closures back in 2005 or 6, I believe. But in 2011, at that time, we had 8 breeding herds, 6 of which were Mycoplasma pneumonia positive. 2012, we conducted 3 elimination programs, and all these were in conjunction with a PERS closure and a filtration construction project. And in 2014, did 2 additional programs, and these were independent of a PERS closure. They were PERS negative, but the mycoplasma on each of those had changed with a previous disruption in gilt flow, and it changed the mycoplasma status, and then took those 2 programs on, those 2 farms in 2014. 2017, again, the different aspects that come into play. This one was in conjunction with the PERS closure and the filtration construction and on-site gilt development construction, all in one, and we had a difficult time in getting the mycoplasma established in the gilt flow, and so that one stretched out really from almost 2 years from our initial anticipated start date. It's important, I believe, to differentiate between a mycoplasma break on a negative, naive farm and elimination failure. And so in one case, you've got an elimination failure, a population of exposed immune sows and a tiny population of gilts that came in,
and you'll find out fairly soon, and you can react quicker to expose those and get back without having to allow that whole herd to destabilize. A break, and we've had, it appears to be one last fall on a naive herd, and vaccinated or not, the whole population is going positive. The finishing flow is much more dramatic in its severity and how you react to that. And so we reacted in those two last year with the whole herd antibiotic therapy, and we're batting 500. Unfortunately, the successful one was 1,200 sows, and the one that wasn't was 5,000. But so you're looking at then a long-term exposure to replacement gilts to get the entire population positive immune. The whole herd antibiotic did not work in the 5,000 through, again, surveillance with laryngeal swabs on a large population after those therapies. And so the 1,200 sow farm through surveillance found that it appears to be negative, and so we're in the process of on the second one of exposure and closure, and then we'll work toward elimination. One was okay. So then, at the completion, we plan to do surveillance on the flow, on late finishing, using serology, using looking at tissue submissions and so on. And so when we're confident that we've been successful, we've discontinued Mycoplasma pneumonia vaccine on our negative flows based on our experience. And a year ago, Dr. Yeske presented here on the limited lateral transmission between sites, and it would be very consistent with our experience. And so to follow that flow and to establish and to verify that elimination program has been successful. Other experimental methods, we're working on tracheal swabs on sow mortalities, seeing if we can pick up anything before we're able to see it on a larger scale, either on mortality and then swabs of incoming naive gilts. It takes time and effort and time to confirm our status on these post-closures. So again, to my original question is why pursue negative status on relative to Mycoplasma pneumonia? Again, in Caden and others, the myco pneumonia positive was 63 cents, but in our world it's usually with PRRS or flu or some combination, and so again, at $5 to $10 per pig cost of living with mycoplasma, we had the methods to eliminate from our flows, and so we're going to continue to work toward that direction. Thank you again, Dr. Peters, and thank you for all the assistance of Dr. Brad and Jake in working with our system.